The Mastery of Emotions, a journey through perspectives. Before starting the video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Emotions are like a language not of words but of feelings. But like any language, not everyone speaks it fluently. Some stumble through their emotions, reacting impulsively and regretting their actions later. Others, however, master this language, controlling not only their actions but their entire life path. Today, we look into the lives of two men, Shiva and Raju. These men are on opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of how they perceive the world and their place in it. And as we will see, it is not just their actions but their emotions that dictate their fate. Shiva is the kind of man who believes in absolute control. To him, life is a series of choices, and each choice leads to success or failure. He was raised in an environment where responsibility was king. His father drilled it into his head from a young age. You are responsible for everything that happens to you. No excuses. If you fail, it's because you didn't try hard enough. If you succeed, it's because you earned it. This worldview shaped Shiva into a man who saw life as a battle. And like any battle, there were winners and losers. As a young boy, Shiva admired heroes of conquest, warriors, kings, and generals. His bookshelves were filled with stories of great men who bent the world to their will. Men who overcame obstacles and emerged victorious. If they can do it, Shiva would tell himself, so can I. He learned to see emotions not as weaknesses, but as tools to be harnessed and controlled. Anger could be turned into motivation. Fear could be transformed into caution. Sadness was something to be overcome, not indulged. One defining moment in Shiva's life came when he was just 10 years old. His father had taken him to the park, where they often played catch. But on this particular day, Shiva was feeling off. He had just gotten a bad grade in school, and it weighed heavily on him. As they played, Shiva's frustration started to build, and eventually, he missed a catch. His father, usually patient, snapped. "Why did you miss that?" His father asked, his voice harsh. "You weren't focused. Focus is everything. If you don't focus, you fail." Shiva tried to explain his bad day at school, but his father cut him off. Excuses. Life doesn't care about your excuses. You failed today because you didn't control your emotions. You let them distract you. If you don't control your emotions, they'll control you, and once they control you, you're done for. That moment stayed with Shiva. From then on, he vowed never to let his emotions get the best of him. Fast forward 20 years, and Shiva had become a successful businessman. He was ruthless, efficient, and highly respected in his field. His employees feared him, but they also admired him. Shiva is a man who gets things done, they would say. But Shiva's personal life was a different story. His relationships were strained. His wife often complained that he was too cold, too distant. "You never show any emotion," she would say. "It's like you're a machine." Shiva didn't mind. To him, emotions were for the weak. "I am strong because I control my emotions," he would tell himself. "That's why I've succeeded where others have failed." A different path. Then there is Raju, a man who could not be more different from Shiva. While Shiva believes in conquest, Raju believes in compassion. Where Shiva sees life as a battle, Raju sees it as a community. He grew up in a family where love, kindness, and empathy were valued above all else. His father was a social worker, and his mother was a teacher. They taught Raju from a young age that the world is full of suffering, and it is our duty to help alleviate it. "The strongest people are those who help others rise," his father would often say. Raju took this lesson to heart. He admired spiritual leaders like Gandhi and the Buddha, men who preached love and peace over violence and power. What's the point of succeeding if you're stepping on others to get there? Raju would think to himself. He believed that emotions like love and empathy were the greatest strengths a person could have. One day, when Raju was just 12 years old, he saw a man on the street, homeless and shivering in the cold. Without thinking twice, when one person suffers, we all suffer. When one person succeeds, we all succeed. To Raju, mastering emotions didn't mean controlling them or shutting them down. It meant understanding them, embracing them, and using them as a force for good. The intersection of two worlds. One day, the paths of Shiva and Raju crossed. They were both attending a charity event, though for very different reasons. In them everything. Raju looked at Shiva, surprised by his bluntness. "I don't see it that way," Raju replied. "Yes, people make mistakes, but not everyone is born with the same opportunities. Some people are dealt a bad hand from the start. It's our job to help them, not judge them." Shiva shook his head. Helping people is one thing, but there's a fine line between helping and enabling. If you keep giving someone a handout, they'll never learn to wonder if perhaps there was more to success than just compassion. The catalyst. Weeks passed, and both men returned to their respective lives. Shiva continued to run his company with an iron fist, while Raju continued his work in social services. But neither could shake the conversation they had that night at the charity event. Then, one day, something happened that would change both of their lives forever. Shiva was on his way to an important meeting when he saw a familiar face. It was the same homeless man he had encountered years earlier, the one he had refused to help. But this time, something was different. The man looked worse than before, thinner, sicker, more broken. For the first time, Shiva didn't feel anger. He felt something else, something foreign, guilt. Have I been wrong all this time? He thought to himself. Maybe this man didn't need to suffer more to learn. Maybe he needed help. Without thinking, Shiva approached the man and handed him some money. The man looked up at him, surprised, but said nothing. As Shiva walked away, he felt a strange mix of emotions, confusion, guilt, relief. For the first time in his life, he had acted on compassion instead of control. Meanwhile, Raju had his own life-changing moment. He had been working with a young man named Ravi, who had been struggling to find a job. Despite Raju's best efforts to help him, Ravi kept making the same mistakes, missing job interviews and refusing to take responsibility for his actions. After months of frustration, Raju finally snapped. "You need to stop blaming everyone else for your problems," he said, his voice sharper than usual. "If you want to change your life, you have to take responsibility." Ravi was taken aback, but Raju's words struck a chord. Over the next few weeks, Ravi began to change. He showed up to his interviews, took his responsibilities seriously, and eventually found a job. For Raju, this was a revelation. Maybe Shiva was right, he thought. Maybe there is a place for tough love in all of this. The journey toward balance. Both men had started to see the cracks in their worldviews. Shiva realized that compassion was not a weakness, and Raju realized that responsibility was not incompatible with empathy. They began to change, slowly but surely. Shiva started incorporating more compassion into his business practices. He offered his employees more support and started investing in community projects. Not just for PR, but because he genuinely believed it was the right thing to do. He found that, far from weakening him, this new approach made him a better leader. His employees were more loyal, more motivated, and his business flourished even more. Raju, on the other hand, began to set firmer boundaries in his social work. He still believed in compassion, but he also started encouraging the people he worked with to take more responsibility for their lives. He found that this approach, too, led to better outcomes. People were more likely to succeed when they were held accountable, but only if they were also given the support they needed. The convergence of two worlds. In the end, Shiva and Raju both learned that mastering emotions is not about choosing between control and compassion. It's about balance. It's about knowing when to be strong and when to be soft, when to push and when to pull back. They realized that emotions are not something to be controlled or ignored, but something to be understood, embraced, and used wisely. The key to mastering emotions is not in rejecting them, but in integrating them into a broader understanding of the world. Shiva and Raju, once so different, had come to the same conclusion: true strength lies in balance. In the final analysis, neither Shiva's control nor Raju's compassion was enough on its own, but together, they formed a complete picture of what it means to be human, to feel deeply, and to act wisely. And in that balance, they found not only success, but peace. The new lesson: as their paths merged, Shiva and Raju became teachers, sharing their newfound wisdom with the world. They gave talks on emotional mastery, emphasizing that the path to success was not through domination or submission, but through balance. Their lessons resonated with people from all walks of life. Emotion is energy in motion, Raju would often say. It's neither good nor bad. It's how you use it that determines the outcome. Shiva, in his more direct style, would add, mastering your emotions doesn't mean controlling them. It means using them as tools for growth and progress. Emotions can be your greatest ally or your greatest enemy, depending on how you wield them. And so, the legacy of these two men grew, inspiring others to find their own balance between strength and compassion, control and empathy. Because, in the end, mastering emotions is not just about you. It's about how you connect with the world around you, how you lift others up while lifting yourself. Epilogue. Years later, Shiva and Raju sat together at another charity event. This time, they were the keynote speakers, and the crowd hung on their every word. As they spoke, it became clear that their once opposing worldviews had merged into something greater, a philosophy of emotional intelligence that was both practical and deeply human. Life is not about winning or losing, Shiva said, looking out at the crowd. It's about how you play the game, and the key to playing well is mastering your emotions. Raju nodded in agreement, Because when you master your emotions, you don't just master yourself, you master your life. The audience erupted in applause, and as Shiva and Raju looked at each other, they knew they had finally found the balance they had been searching for all along. If you are enjoying this video, please subscribe to the channel